Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We're live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on today Carole Baskin. What is up?
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
This is going to be a fun conversation today. So there's so many layers to your quick rise to popularity. I mean, obviously you're in your inner circle, everybody knew who you were, but once you got onto Netflix, it just generated really quickly. The first thing I always like asking somebody when they get into the public eye so quickly, how did that affect you? Like, not even like the negative or the positive, just in general, just being, you're just walking out to the store and people start recognizing you so quickly. How did that affect you?
You know, here in Tampa, that's always been my experience. I mean, I even just sitting at a traffic light in my car, people will roll down their windows and honk and wave and want to talk about big cats because they love big cat rescue.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was invited after Tiger King came out that I was invited to Dancing with the Stars out in LA.
Yeah.
And because of COVID, they were flying me into a small private airport. And when I got off the plane, everybody there knew who I was and wanted to come up for a selfie. And all of a sudden I thought, that's really weird. How would anybody here in LA have any idea who I was? Yeah. And that was my first realization that this was as broad as it was. And it was weird. It was freaking weird. Because it's like everywhere you go, people are jumping out at you and wanting to take pictures. And the paparazzi was all over Hollywood, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
So you couldn't do anything without people jumping out of bushes and flashing cameras in my face.
How do you contain that all? Like, how do you keep that at a level where it's just I'm still who I am? I'm not going to allow it to change who I am. How did you contain that as much as you could?
It always kind of inspires this fight or flight instinct in me, because for decades the people that abuse animals have been threatening my life, and most people only realize this because they watched it in Tiger King. So for them it's all new, but for me this has been for decades. And so when people jump out at me, I'm always a little concerned that it might be somebody that's wanting to kill me rather than have a selfie with me. So it's only been increased since the popularity of Tiger King, and because there's so many more people doing that, I find that it's it feels like such an invasion of privacy to me. Like when I go to an airport and everybody there that isn't overtly coming up and trying to get a picture is doing it, kind of like surreptitiously as they go by. Like I can't see them doing that kind of stuff. And it just, I feel like I can't sit down and put food in my mouth, because as I'm chewing, there's going to be all these people that are filming me eating a meal. And so it made me really self-conscious of everything that I do or say when I'm out in public because of that. And yet, on the other hand, I can kind of understand it, because if I were to see somebody that was really famous, I would probably stare at them. I don't know that I know I wouldn't go up and ask for a selfie, and I don't know if I'd take a picture of them, but I think I'd be curious, and I'd be, like, is that really who I think it is, kind of a thing. And so I try not to judge people that are doing that in any kind of a bad way, because I might do it myself. But it's just weird. And I don't know how I don't know why anybody would ever want to be a celebrity, like to be a movie star or to be involved in an industry where people would recognize you, because then you can't do or go anywhere, or you can't be yourself anywhere.
Yeah. And you see that a lot with, if you go even the root of child stars, and you look at the percent of addiction and stuff that happened after, right? It's just that they're constantly just trying to control that fame, that anxiety of being around people on a regular basis everywhere they go. So I understand that. So let's dive back. When was your first?
Somewhat normal.
When was your first experience with a cat? And I'm talking about a big cat, and you actually starting to get around them and stuff like that. What age were you, and how did that all start?
I was 17 the first time I came across a bobcat that had been hit by a car, and the vet it was already at the veterinary office, and they can fix them up in 30 minutes to an hour, but then you're looking at months of rehab sometimes for their bones to heal. And because they knew I loved cats and I spent a lot of time in vets' offices because I had show cats, which were always needing vet attention, they asked if I would take the cat home and release it. And so I did. And this seems to have been a pattern that has followed me over the years of like every broken down.
So you're 17 when that's that first time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything about rehab. There weren't conferences that you could go to or books that you could read on the subject. And if there were, it was like how to rehab a bird or how to rehab a squirrel, not something that spends its entire existence trying to tear your face off because they're just vicious cats. But I love that about them, that they're so tough and, they get hit by cars, sometimes more than once, and still manage to get up and walk away from that. And you're talking about a 20-pound cat. Those cats are tough.
Yeah. And how, from one, it started growing. When did it actually become something? Because like you said, as it starts growing financially, there's other obstacles, right, to feed these cats and keep them going. How did that turn into more of a bigger, like, I even call it a business, but in a way where charity and fundraising, how did that all start?
Well, the ones that I did in my youth were just, the
odd one,
months or years in between. And so there wasn't like a growing group of them. But when I was 30 something, Don, my husband at the time, and I were in real estate for a living, and we would buy llamas and turn them loose on big tracts of land because they clear about eye level and they're really easy to contain. Whereas most, like goats and stuff, they'll hop over any kind of fence, but llamas don't. So we were at an exotic animal auction buying llamas, and a guy came in with a 6-month-old bobcat that he didn't want anymore. And his wife didn't want her anymore because she was growing up to be a bobcat. Yeah. And she had been bred in captivity, so she couldn't be released to the wild, and they had declawed her, so she couldn't catch food, even if it was legal to release her. And it's not legal to release any captive-born wild cat. And so this guy next to me starts bidding on her, and I leaned over to him and I said, when that cat grows up, she is going to tear your face off. And he said, I'm a taxidermist. I'm just going to club her in the head in the parking lot and make a den decoration out of her. And so I started crying, and my husband started bidding, and we probably paid more for that bobcat than anybody's ever paid for a bobcat in the history of bobcats, but she was not going to get clubbed in the parking lot that day. And so we brought her home, and of course she was every bit as wretched as I expected her to be. And she was beating up our German Shepherd and scaring the living daylights out of my 12-year-old daughter. And so instead of thinking, wow, this was a really bad idea, my husband said, we need to find somebody that she can live with. And so he started calling around, and this guy said that he would sell us a bobcat for her to raise up with, but we had to come to Minnesota to pick her up, or pick him up, I don't even know if we knew what it was, but we get to Minnesota, and we have driven up there in a van with my daughter and one of her little friends from school, expecting we're going to pick up a friend for Windsong, is what we named the bobcat that was terrorizing our household. And there's a picture of her behind my desk. So this was Windsong.
Oh, gorgeous.
He's cute. He's so cute and wicked. So we get there, and there's no sign out front that says what this place is. And we go inside this metal shed, and the flies in there were so thick, we had to take handkerchiefs and put them over our faces to be able to breathe. And the guy's pulling out all of these kittens and showing us bobcats and Canada lynx and Siberian lynx. And I asked him if there was this big of a market for these as pets. And he said, no, we're a fur farm. Whatever we don't sell as pets, we'll slaughter next year for their fur. Yeah, caught you in mid-drink too, just like it did me. Except I burst into tears again. And I had been kind of, it was dark when we went in, so my eyes were kind of adjusting to what I was seeing in there. And I realized that there was a whole pile of dead cats over in the corner, and they had only taken this little piece of belly fur, and that's what they make the coats out of. It's white fur with spots, whereas the rest of their coat, as you saw, the rest of their coat is kind of brown and mottled, not very pretty. So that's why it takes like 20 bobcats to make a short stole. And I heard my husband say, how much for every cat here? And we came home with 56 bobcats, Canada lynx, and Siberian lynx. So we went from one bobcat to 57 bobcats in 24 hours. Yeah. So we
how did you prepare to like even shelter and food? And I mean, that's a huge amount. How'd you get prepared for that?
We went into town because, we came with, I think we had more than one pet taxi with us, but it was not more than 3. So we went into town, we bought every pet carrier we could find, every bucket that we could drill holes into, every toolbox that we could drill holes into, those plastic toolboxes. We went to a feed store and got hay. We got all of the puppy milk replacer and kitten milk replacer and goat milk replacer. And everybody that we took that day were kittens. We had no way to transport adults. And the following year, we went back and got the 28 adults and more kittens that had been born. So by that time, we had gotten all of the cats off of that fur farm the second year. And then the third year, we bought out a second fur farm and bought out all of their animals at one time. And there were 22 there. And then we started working on the Canadian fur farms and trying to get the cats out of there. And I think we got 12 out of Canada before I lost my husband. And that caused our entire real estate business was seized in a conservatorship. Instead of spending the $500,000 a year we were spending on the cats, I was cut back to an allowance of $125,000. Later, I think they upped it to $150,000 a year. So I had to start learning how to do fundraising and created a nonprofit and did all of that to try and keep the cats alive during that period of time. But we built.
I was about to say that it's. I mean, the responsibility. How prevalent is it in Canada? Like, I mean, this is I mean, maybe I'm living under a rock, but I've never even heard of these in Canada. Which part of Canada were these located?
I'd have to look on our records. I'm wanting to say it started with an M.
Manitoba.
I'm wanting to say like Malbec or I don't know, but back in the 90s, I had never heard of it either. And yet we had these 2 huge fur farms here in the US.
So if they were producing money, why would they sell out the cats? Obviously you overpaid, I'm assuming.
Well, we overpaid, but it was also really good timing. And probably you're younger than I am. I'm 60. You look like you may be 30 something.
44. I wish. But you're being very nice, but thank you.
So, you were probably, my daughter is 40, so you would have been like prepubescent at the time that this was happening. But PETA had been going around New York and, all of these cities throwing or spray painting and throwing buckets of red paint on women who were wearing fur coats. And so the fur industry was like, people were really going against the idea of wearing fur, and it became taboo to do it. And so these fur farms are looking at, we got all these cats out here and people are not buying fur. So the deal that we actually made with the fur farmers after the first year, because the first year we had no idea what we were doing. The second year, when we went back, we said, okay, we're going to pay you top dollar for every adult, every man, woman, and child in here. Yeah. And the agreement is that you never raise cats again for their fur. And they agreed to that. And that was what we did with each one of the subsequent.
Was this in a contract?
It was a verbal contract. We have since made it oral or made it written contracts. We take animals from people, but they upheld their end of the
which is amazing.
Back into cat fur.
Yeah. That is just, I mean, it's you do understand it from the side of where it came from, and obviously I do remember that, Pete. I do remember that stage when it took off like that, and it went crazy, and people really were against it. I remember the media and all that, so I do see the side of that. So
interesting though, because that was the 90s, and we thought, okay, the fur industry is dead. We're getting all these animals out of here, and it's over. And yet, it wasn't really until 2018 that the fur industry finally heaved its last breath. People weren't wearing cat furs, but they weren't wearing other furs either after about 2018.
Yeah, I do remember. Sorry about that. So with everything that happened during that period, when were you approached for the original Tiger King show, and how did they approach you? How did they find you and all that stuff like that?
Well, very shortly after rescuing 56 cats and then 28 cats and then 22 cats, people started saying, would you take my lion? Would you take my tiger? And so at each juncture, I thought, what are people doing with lions and tigers? And naively, I thought that we could fix this pretty easily. It was like, surely we'll get all of these cats out of these horrible situations and we'll petition for better laws so that people can't have them, and it'll be done. And we're still petitioning. But during that period of time, we became very well known for what we were doing. And so anytime anybody was filming anything about a cat, they would contact what was then called Wildlife on Easy Street. And in 2003, we changed our name to Big Cat Rescue. But we'd let them come out to the sanctuary. We had 200 cats at our peak. Really huge naturalistic enclosures. So we had professional photographers that would come here and take pictures of our tigers swimming in the lake and say that they were in India and saw it. You know, one of them even had like, you know, this big red ball that we had in the background of the shot. We're like, how did they explain that to National Geographic? But everybody would come here and film. And so in 2014, I think, is when this group from Tiger King came to us. And they said they were working on a program called Stolen World. And what they wanted to show was all of this abuse that is being done to these wild animals and how they're being bred to be used as pay-to-play photo props. And then they have to be thrown away when they're about 12 weeks old because they can take a finger off a child. And so we were all about that. And there had been a program out that had been very successful in changing hearts and minds called Blackfish. Are you familiar with that?
No. Give me a little more detail on that.
It was about orcas in SeaWorld and how they were taken from the wild and how, you know, like everybody knows Shamu of SeaWorld.
Yeah, of course.
There were like 30 different Shamus because they die so young in captivity, but the public didn't know. So when they did this expose, people didn't go to SeaWorld anymore. And SeaWorld ended up having to change their practices and stop taking animals from the wild and stop breeding them for life in prison. And so we were all about doing a cat version of that for big cats. Yeah. Which is what this crew said they were doing. And they came back over a period of 5 years filming, and they had shown us sizzle reels and trailers of what they were doing. And this is part of the lawsuit that we just filed against them, is saying, look, you guys held yourselves out as being conservationists and that this was going to be a film that showed the abuse of this industry and how these animals are exploited. And instead, it was just this character-driven dumpster fire where they made up a feud between me and somebody I've never even spoken to. And so the whole thing was just nonsense. And as bad as it was, I would have just let it go, except that they came out with a Tiger King 2. And they had reached out to us a few months ago and said, oh, we just want to clear the air with you. And I said, lose my number. Shame on me, you know, or shame on you, rather, if you do something horrible like that. But shame on me if I let you do it to me twice. And so there was no way I was going to participate with those people after what they had done.
So you're saying this was filmed over a 5-year period, that season? Wow.
Yeah.
So during
look at it, you'll see my hair is like all different lengths.
Yeah, I guess when you're watching, and it was even my staff was bringing it to my attention too. I guess I had forgotten. It was in the height of the pandemic. People were home, so it was just like everybody was stuck to Netflix. That was, what else was it to do when you have nothing else to do, right? And as that was happening, when you were getting, this is totally off the record here, but when you're getting during the whole,
for being filmed.
But this is when during the whole filming, did you see, like, was there any moment that you're seeing like, hey, they're really trying to ask questions that are going to put me in a negative light or try to put myself in a situation I'm uncomfortable in? Like, was that ever a sense on your part, or only when it came out?
In 2018, they were trying to sell this to CNN. And that was the time when they came to us and they showed us all of the trailers and everything that, I mean, in those trailers, what it said is, here's all these people that are doing all these horrible things to these animals, but there's one person who's speaking out against it, and it's Carole Baskin.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole pitch of their film. And CNN didn't buy it. And so they apparently sold it to Netflix.
Yeah.
After they sold it to Netflix, and we didn't, know that there had been any change in what the film was going to be, they came back and started asking an awful lot of questions about my husband, Don Lewis.
Yeah.
And my husband, my he doesn't like to be called my current husband. He likes to be called my last husband. My husband, Howard Baskin, said, why are you asking all of these questions about Don Lewis? And they said, well, the bad guys always make up stuff about you guys. And they've been saying for years that she killed Don. And so we just want her to be able to put that to rest.
Yeah.
And so I answered everything that they asked me about it. If you look at, or if you ask somebody to sit down and watch Tiger King, watch it all the way through, sit down afterwards and say, why do you think Carole killed her husband? Because I guarantee you the vast majority of people who watch it come away thinking that I killed my husband. They can't tell you why, because there's nothing in there that I said or did. No. But what they did do that I thought was, it was brilliant from a filmmaker's perspective to be able to twist something so much, is they did line up all of these people who didn't know anything about Don, saying that they thought that I had killed him. And then they would cut to some slow motion, angry look of me looking into the camera, being all stern. And these were shots that they took where they would ask me, walk down the street toward the camera. And we would do this over and over and over. And it's like, on the 400th time that we're doing this, I'm looking at them like, for crying out loud, have you not got the film that you need of me walking down this road? So now I'm looking angry into the camera. And that's the shot that they have. All of these people are saying, she killed her husband, she killed her husband, she killed her husband. It's not anything that I'm saying. It's because they're repeating it over and over again into your psyche. And you're looking at this angry woman on the screen and you're like, yeah, I think she did. And so there's this confirmation bias that once you have been tricked into believing something, especially if you have been involved in sharing like all of these memes and all of these hateful things that people were saying during that period of time, if you go back and you find out the truth later, you can't admit it to yourself. You have to dig your heels in, no matter what the evidence is to the contrary, so that you don't look like you were an idiot for being involved in the first place. So I think it's going to be really hard for people to ever get past that first impression that they had.
Is there any part of you that wants to change people's mindset with that? Or are you just at the point where you know yourself the truth and that's all that matters?
From the very beginning, I felt like it really didn't matter what other people thought of me. Yeah. But it matters from a perspective of what we do next. And what we have to do right now is end the cub petting, because we're going to lose the tiger in the wild if we don't stop this captive breeding that is creating this legal smokescreen for illegal trafficking of cats. Yeah. And when we're trying to ask China to phase out their tiger farms where they're actually farming these cats for their parts, they look at us at CITES and say, you don't even know where your tigers are in the United States. At least ours are on government sanctioned farms. And they're right. We don't know where they are. Yeah. So if people are associating the person that's leading the call to end captive breeding as being a murderer, that really makes it hard to get that passed. And so I think they've done a huge disservice to the entire planet, because we're all going to lose the tiger if people don't take action on this right now.
What do you think the numbers are? Just a broad number of how many of these farms are in throughout the, I would say even North America, because obviously you brought Canada to light, North America. How many farms do you think roughly are out there?
There's estimated to be somewhere around 4,000 tigers in the wild.
Okay.
In the United States, in 2004, USDA did the first ever count of tigers. And when they do a count, they just reach out to everybody who has a USDA license and says, how many tigers do you have?
Yeah.
It's not like they go count.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But back then, in 2004, there were 5,000 tigers. Those 5,000 tigers were in USDA licensed facilities, which means that the people were either supposedly exhibiting the animals or breeding the animals. You have to have a USDA license for that. Yeah. Of those, I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of, I forget, something like 3,500 facilities. Only 200 of those are the big accredited zoos. So the rest of them are places like you saw in Tiger King, like Joe Exotic and Doc Antle and Mario Tabro and all of these places. I don't know that there's ever been a count anywhere else in the world as far as how many of these cats there are. And there's never been a count, even in the United States, of how many are privately owned as pets. We don't find out about them until they're wandering loose in Houston or Dallas or Florida or wherever they escape from. The tiger farming industry, for their parts, has been very popular in China since the 90s, and there's estimated to be somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 tigers in those farms. And in Laos, I think there are, I couldn't give you a really good, I know it's in excess of 1,000 tigers in Laos that are being bred for that.
So these are all government regulated or run in China?
They're not government run, but they are run with the full knowledge of the government. Okay. So what happens in these areas where they're farming the tigers for their parts, they're counting on the tiger going extinct in the wild. And as long as you are driving the demand for these tiger parts, which would be things like tiger teeth and tiger...
There's always going to be a black market.
Yeah, and the black market is actually for people who can afford the premium product, because nobody wants an inbred cage-raised tiger product. They want the wild, premium, fierce, virile animal. So they're counting on those tigers, those last 4,000, being completely wiped out through poaching, and then they'll have the market cornered on those parts. And so they're just
so sad.
Biding their time.
So crazy when you hear that, and it's so hard to control, right? Because like you said, the money drives any market. Doesn't matter where it is. When you're dealing with, especially, I mean, in a culture that certain parts of the tiger have so much cultural meaning or benefit to people. I mean, people are going to pay a premium for that.
And the traditional Chinese medicine community has come out against the idea of using endangered species for their medicines and have said that there is no medicinal value. But you're right that it is a cultural thing, and it's more about showing your wealth than it is about health.
Yeah. So with yourself right now, you are recording. I know you can't talk much about it, but you said you are recording a new show.
Yes, I'm so excited. Well, actually, we've wrapped recording on what's about to air. It's going to air on November the 14th, and it's called Carole Baskin's Cage Fight. When they told me the name of it, I freaking laughed out loud.
Okay, yeah.
Because it's like, yes, I don't think any cat belongs in a cage. And so to call it Cage Fight was just perfect. And their premise was, that I've been pretty much beat up by the press. I've been taking all these punches from all of these bad guys, and I'm finally coming out and going to win this cage fight. So the film is going to be coming out on Discovery Plus. And what I love about the show is that it's real. So many of these reality TV shows that you see are really scripted.
100%. I've had on the show handful, I would say 7, 8 individuals that were in the past on reality TV, and when you ask them, and it's just like one gentleman, he was on a Jersey hair show, and I can't remember the name of it, Jerseylicious, I think it was called, and he was telling me a story where he was put into they brought him to a cafe with his cousin. They were going to talk about a business deal they had, and all of a sudden his wife shows up. And so they were just talking. He didn't expect his wife to show up there. And then she shows up, and then his ex-girlfriend walks in to get a coffee. So they actually contracted his ex-girlfriend to come in to get a coffee. And then it's just, they don't tell you what's going to happen, but they put you in situations to get the reaction by everybody. And it's just like, wow. And he was just like, that was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever been. Like, so they put you in these situations. So they put you in a spot where they force you to react, and they want to see your reaction, right? So, and just like you said, walking back and forth 300 times or 200 times just to get that one shot they're looking for, where there's no real reality to it, right?
And so many of the people who were involved in Tiger King have said the same thing, that Eric Good was the producer, or Rebecca Chaiklin would ask them a question and they'd answer it. And they'd say, well, didn't you really mean to say this? Don't you really mean this? And they would just do it until the point you're like, yes, please let me out from in front of these lights. I'll say anything you want. Just let me go.
Yeah.
And then they felt bad because that was the clip that was used. And it was like, no, I didn't believe that, but they said it anyway. And so I didn't feel like they ever did that to me, because I can put up with an awful lot of that. I might stare angrily at the camera, but I'm not going to say something I don't mean. And it was just so clear from hearing from all of these people that it was not a documentary by any stretch of the imagination. So anyway, what I love about the new show is that even though it's a reality TV show, it's actually real. And it's actually covering the kinds of stuff that we do every day. And so we've been able to have a huge say in what those things are. And, when they want to suggest something or say something, like, wouldn't you like to go do it this way? And it's like, I never do that. I'm not going to do that on TV. And so they've let us do.
So were you approached, or you approached them for this?
They approached us.
Very, very good. Very good. How long of a recording was this?
We started, I think, the negotiations started in like July of 2020. And I think we actually started filming in October of 2020. And then, like I said, the first 2 hours are going to air in November. Well, it is November.
Yeah, I was about to say.
In a couple of weeks. And then if people really love it, which I hope they do, then I hope it does become a series, because the premise of the show is what we do, which is to go after these bad guys and to expose the abuse that is going on behind the scenes, to talk to people that are whistleblowers from those facilities, to get drone aerial footage of what's going on.
Seriously,
yeah. And then
so are you actually interviewing these people yourself, or are you part of it? How does it all work?
Yeah. Because that's how it really works. I have to talk to all these people and find out who's telling the truth and who's just mad and who's got a axe to grind, and where is there really abuse and why isn't anybody hearing about it. And then we put together these huge packages of information and take it to the authorities, whether it be, it's usually both the state agencies, the federal agencies, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we have to make the case for them, because they don't do investigative work. They don't do undercover work. They would never in a million years find out any of this stuff was going on. So we find it, we expose it, we present that information to them, and then we stay on their case until they do something about it. And that's what the show's about. And I think people will love that, because nobody likes animal abuse. Everybody wants to see that stopped. And I think people will really get into what it's like to do that, and hopefully will help us do that.
I love it. I'm gonna bring it back. Where did you grow up? How many siblings did you have? And give me a little run of your childhood. Were you always have a passion for animals?
I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and my father was in the Air Force, so I was born at the Lackland Air Force Base. He was only in for a 4-year stint. Excuse me. And then we came back to Tampa, Florida. He was a pilot, and so he taught flight instruction in Panama City, and then he moved to West Virginia and became the private pilot for Governor Archmore. Oh, wow. And then we moved back to Tampa, or they moved back to Tampa when Governor Rockefeller took over. When Governor Rockefeller took over, he sold all of the state planes and then bought helicopters, and none of the state pilots could fly a helicopter. So my dad lost his job. And by this time I was on my own. I had left home at the age of 15. And
that young, huh?
Yeah. I was always a lot older than my years. But when I left home, or when my father lost his job and came back to Tampa, I was in West Virginia, and I thought, that is just so wrong. I'm going to find a way to bring this guy down. That it was just, I felt like he was doing something really stupid to the state, as far as like selling the planes and buying helicopters. That seemed so ridiculous to me. So I got a job working. I was the youngest state employee ever at the age of 15. I had to get permission signed off by my family to even do it. I didn't have a high school diploma. Got me in a lot of press, because people are like, there's people more qualified than her to be working there. And I got a job working for the secretary of the secretary to Governor J. Rockefeller. And turned out I really liked him. So I loved my job, because my job was research, and I loved to snoop and to get to the bottom of things. And something that I thought was so smart about him is every time he was going to meet with a member of Congress or meet with somebody important, he would put together a dossier on that person so that he knew everything about them before he went into the meeting. Well, that was my job, to go find all of that stuff. Yeah. And the one thing that I can remember so vividly was Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia. Nobody could find a photograph of this guy. And so I had his whole dossier that I put together, but nobody had a picture of him. And everybody said, he looks just like Robert Redford. So I went and I got a picture of Robert Redford and I put it in the file. And I could hear him screaming my name from the next room. He's like, Spears, get in here.
That's awesome. So how long did you stay there for, working wise?
I was in a relationship with an extremely abusive man. He was 6'4" and huge and just would beat the snot out of me all the time. And so he said he wanted to come back to Tampa. And I was like, I will drive you. And so I figured I could drive him back to Tampa, dump him off at his mother's house, and I'd turn around and go back to West Virginia, and I'd finally be free of him. But when I got to Florida again, I didn't have any money. So I had to go get a job to have enough money to get back up to West Virginia, and got a job at a Zayre store where I ended up meeting the man who became my daughter's father. So I never went back to West Virginia. Not that I was in love with him, but it was just a whole series of events that ended up keeping me here.
It's very, very interesting. So with everything you're doing, and obviously there's tons of layers right now, obviously with the show, you're hoping it'll continue and grow into something, to a series, and I'm hoping it will for you as well. Where do you see over the next 4 to 5 years, 10 years, that industry with the cats? Do you see it still, that the black market still continuing to grow? Do you see it slowing down? Like, where's people's mindsets? Because I think the average person, when you bring it to light, I think majority of people would be on your side, but not many people will take action. And that is the problem with most causes. People are all hurrah, 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 but when it comes to actual action, it's a different story altogether. It doesn't matter what type of charity, it doesn't matter what type of cause. Most people will just take a step back because they're so numb to it all, right? Where's your mindset? Like, how do you think change will finally start occurring? Obviously, you're doing a big part, but are there others like you out there that are trying to make as much change as you? It sounds funny, but there are. But I mean, in general, like there's a lot of legwork involved in what you're trying to accomplish, right?
I think each of us are here to do our part.
Yeah.
Some people may not have awakened to doing their part yet, but one of the things I do find in that we have a huge social media presence on mostly Facebook and Instagram, growing it on TikTok. But the people that join us there are people who feel really empowered to do something with their lives, because we're putting them in touch with their members of Congress. We're getting them involved in the process for the first time ever in some cases. Yeah. And they're feeling like, I can change my world. I can make my world what I want it to be. So I'm really encouraged by the number of people that are involved in doing that. But I think there's also like this convergence of things that is all happening just in time before we completely implode the planet. Yeah. And I think COVID-19 is a huge part of that, because I think that COVID-19 has caused us to leap forward at least 15 years in our technology and our embracing of that technology. I totally agree. I mean, you're getting grandparents that would have never touched a FaceTime or a WhatsApp video or a chat, and all of a sudden now they're talking to their grandchildren. Yeah, so I totally agree. It's sped up. I always say that it sped up us like 10 years, minimal 10 years. So yeah, I do agree with that. So that does affect a ton of industries as well, right? So give me a like understanding of your fundraising. Like, what do you do fundraising wise? Because obviously that's a big part of what you do. One of our big events of the year is coming up this Saturday. It's called the Walkabout, and I don't know when your thing will air, but it's
a couple weeks later. Yeah, because we're doing season 7, but it'll be a couple of years later. But what I'll do is, for social media, this will be aired first. But what I'll do is, if you send me all the stuff, I will put on all through all our social media platforms, advertise it for you as well.
Oh, thank you.
100%.
So every year we celebrate the birthday of the sanctuary, which was November 4th of 1992. And we base that on the day that we rescued Winsome from the auction. And on November the 6th, we're having our big annual walkabout. It's not really a walkabout anymore because of COVID, because nobody can come here and walk about. We've been closed since COVID hit. And of course, 5 days after COVID hit, Tiger King came out, and then you've got all of the crazies in that want to come here and kill the cats because they don't belong in cages, and they don't understand that we're on the same side that they are. We don't think they should be in cages either. So what we do on Walkabout is we do virtual tours, and all day long throughout the day for $4.99, people buy their ticket, which gives them the agenda of where we're going to be, what time we're going to be on Facebook, what time we're going to be on Instagram, what time we're going to be on TikTok, what time we're going to be on YouTube, and doing all of these live events throughout the day. And then we all get together at Clubhouse at 6 p.m. and we talk about the day that we had. And so all of the money that is generated from the ticket sales on that day goes into conservation efforts in the wild. We support a lot of small cat conservation projects. We do some for bigger cats, but the little cats hardly get any of the funding. And so we try to make our $100,000 really mean something and do something for those cats. We do all kinds throughout the year. We have Facebook fundraisers on our videos. People can donate there. They can donate on our website. We send out a newsletter, not as often as we should, but maybe once every 2 or 3 months, we'll send out a e-zine. And then also quarterly, we send out what is a 32-page glossy magazine called the Big Cat Times. And so those are our primary fundraising elements. If I could go back to the future, though, what I really think the future is going to hold is that people love wild animals. They love seeing them. And what has surprised me is how much people love watching live webcams. We have them all over the property. And so you can tune into all different cages and see our cats all day long, just sleeping, which is what they do all day. But people will go there and they'll chat with each other and they create these amazing friendships with each other while they're watching the cat sleep. And sometimes they capture some really amazing footage that we had no idea. Like we still do rehab for bobcats, but we don't have people around them. So they only have the live webcams on them. And we have seen cats doing the most amazing things on those cameras that's like, wow, this is really learning. So if you can imagine putting 360-degree internet streaming cameras in the wild where these cats live, and then you have a subscription feed to those cameras, just like you would pay for a Netflix subscription. But 90%, 80%, 90% of that feed through a smart contract on the blockchain actually funnels that feed back, the money from that feed back to those local people who live in that area and who are protecting that animal. And if you can get the money into the wallets of the people who are actually on the ground living with the animals and not the government or anybody that's going to corrupt and take the money away, then they have a reason to want to make sure that there are plenty of lions or tigers or whatever kind of wild animal walking by those cameras every day so that people want to subscribe to that feed. That creates a system where everybody has a vested interest in protecting those wild spaces. As long as we have cats in cages, people are never going to do that. As long as it's convenient to take your kids down to the zoo and pay $10 and walk around and make fun of animals in cages, people are not going to do the important work of saving them in the wild. So I think the very first thing we have to do is end the captive breeding, which means the zoos go out of business, means I go out of business, which I love. We'll still do rehab and release, but we won't have these captive animals who can never go free. And it creates a planet where things are equal. People who live in those areas have the same kind of lifestyle that we have. And if you have that, then what do you have wars over? Religion will be about the only thing you can still fight about, but it won't be over resources.
I mean, when you, man, there's a lot of layers there, and it's amazing as it sounds. It feels like it's still so far apart, so far away still. It's there's a lot of, like I said, when it comes to zoos and stuff like that, like where do you honestly see the near future of zoos closing?
Actually, I see them repurposing and retrofitting what they're doing.
Explain that.
I think that they will no longer house at least predator animals. I don't know about hoofstock. Hoofstock may not care, as long as it's dead, they might not care. But predators, they do not want to be in cages. If you open the door, they will show you their preference. And so if the only way that people can see these animals is through a headset, and the zoos offer that low-cost opportunity to people who can't afford a $500 headset. You pay your $10, but you go into the Himalayan building and it's blowing cold air on you, and you put on the headset and all of a sudden you're in the Himalayas and you're seeing a snow leopard in real time, raising your cubs and doing, chasing blue sheep, all of that kind of stuff. And you smell the curry from the monk's tent next door. All of that kind of sensory immersion would be amazing.
It would be amazing.
Would pay for that.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. When you had mentioned a few times, all these people, you call them, I don't know if the exact terminology. So the crazy heads, I think you said, that are against people, animals in cages and all that stuff like that. Is that something that you had mentioned in the beginning, that's something that you have to be aware of on a regular basis? Is that something that you're like, when you're out in public, that you have a sense of like, I got to watch who I'm talking to or what I'm doing? Is that something you have to live with every single day?
Every day. And that's been that way for decades. So I'll probably burn out like, really young, because I don't think anybody was ever meant to be in this state of fight or flight all the time.
Yeah.
But a recent example of that was I ride my bike to and from my home in the sanctuary. And as I was riding down the road, people, how they say, if you're looking at something when you're driving, you may drive right into it because you tend to steer toward it.
Yeah.
So this SUV, dark windows, I can't see inside of it, runs me off the road, apparently because they were looking at me, but they run me off the road. I stumble around trying to catch myself on my bike. And as I'm trying to pick myself back up, they all jump out of the car. And I mean, like, all of the doors fly open. All of these big thugs are running to me. And I'm like, I am so dead, because I cannot outrun these guys. I'm being kidnapped right now, and I'm going to be killed. And all they wanted were selfies. And I just, it's like, you guys could have just stopped my freaking heart over this, but they were just so sweet. And they were like, oh my God, it's Carole Baskin. And so, it's hard to get upset with them, but it's like, they just had no idea what I'm living with or dealing with when people do stuff like that.
Yeah. If something were to happen to you today, in a few words, how would you want to be remembered or described by your loved ones?
That I really need to be remembered or described by anybody. What I really hope to do, I think we're eternal, but in this lifetime, I'm here this time, what I really hope to do is to change the course of where we're headed, which is total destruction of this planet from the way that we have treated the wild animals in it. I'm hoping to finally knock that back in the other direction, where people start using technology in the ways that I just discussed.
Yeah.
So that we see a gradual coming back from the edge of extinction for all of these animals. So I want to see that happen, but it doesn't have to be attributed to me. In fact, on the pages of our website where I talk about it, I keep saying, this is not my personal IP. Steal this, please. Take it, run with it. I want somebody to do this, somebody that knows what they're doing in this realm.
I love it. This has been a fun conversation. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Your audience, do you have an audience in the US?
Yeah, right across. I mean, we've got the last 14 months, we're up to 1.8 million downloads in the last 14 months. So we're busy. Yeah,
Oh
we're busy, and we have a good audience on YouTube as well and stuff. So we do. There'll be this when this is released, there'll be 19 posts towards it and stuff. So you'll get it'll be pushed pretty hard. So I'm excited to have you out on our season 7. So what would you like the audience to hear?
2 things people can do. If you're in the US, please go to bigcatact.com. We make it very easy for you to contact your member of Congress to support the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which bans cub petting and phases out private ownership. If you're not in the US, the biggest thing that you can do is, when you're on social media, if you see somebody posting a picture of a cub or posting a picture of themselves playing with a lion or a tiger, call them out on it. I mean, there was a time when people were stupid and didn't know any better, but that time's long since passed. And if people aren't being applauded for it, if they're being told that's cruel, not cool, they're going to stop it.
You know what? Let me ask you a question on that. And that is something where, with social media, especially Instagram, you will see primarily, I mean, I shouldn't say this primarily, but I've seen quite a few times, it's the Middle East, and you'll get these extremely rich young guys, and they have big cats as pets. And the social media, like, they're getting hundreds of thousands of likes on these videos. How do you stop that? Because obviously they become influencers because of these videos, and obviously social media, Instagram, hence, and Facebook, but I mean primarily Instagram. I see it. They're obviously loving it because they're making a killing off it. They're exactly what these influencers are, or what they want to happen, right? So how do you stop that? How do you slow that down, or even, you said, bring it to aware? Because if most people won't put a comment on there because they know they're going to be bashed, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be the instant internet bullying will happen automatically if you go there and try to protect that or say something against that, because these people are, like I said, it's crazy the amount of likes they get or comments they get on these videos. How do you stop something like that? Can you not go right to the source? Like, do you think Instagram would ever ban these things?
Some of the outlets actually did, like Tinder, it banned the pictures of people doing selfies with the big cats. And Expedia said that they weren't going to be advertising places that allowed contact with the animals. I think TripAdvisor had made a similar promise, but I think it may still be a bit of educational issues, because none of those cats that you see with these people are adults. They are all kittens. And even though they might be, in the case of a lion or a tiger, they could be 500 pounds, they're still emotionally kittens, because as soon as they become adults, they will kill you. And that's when people kill them or get rid of them in some way. And so if people knew that these people were only showing off with babies and really weren't providing lifetime care for the animals, I think that might stop some of that oohing and awing and romanticizing.
What's the timeline here? So just for our audience to reflect on understanding. So when you talk about baby to adult for an animal that size, so maybe some of these videos, exactly what you said, I mean, these look like full size big cats, right? So what's the age difference, or is it up to 6 months? Is it up to 1 year? Like, when does that change occur?
For lions and tigers, which are the main cats that
Yeah.
are used, or ligers, of course, which is a cross, they are mentally kittens until they're between 5 and 7 years old. And so even people like Siegfried and Roy, who people thought were such amazing magicians and had such a fascinating bond with their animals, as soon as Montecore was 7 years old, he nearly killed Troy Horn. So once they are adults, all bets come off, because in the wild, they would kill their own parents for their territory. And it's exactly the same with you. No matter how you raised it, how much love or affection that you showed that animal, how good you were to the animal in your eyes, when they grow up, they're going to do what comes naturally, and that is to kill you for your territory. So with smaller cats, it's younger, like bobcats. By the time they're anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years old is when people usually get rid of them, because they become adults at that period of time. But a lion or a tiger, I mean, in their first year, they can be over 100 pounds. And by the time they're 2 years old, they can be 200, 300 pounds. And then by the time they're 5 years old, they can be 400 or 500 pounds. So they look huge and they look like adults to people that don't know the telltale signs, but they're not. And so these people are not special. They don't have a bond. They all want you to believe that they're unique in their bond with the animals, the lion whisperer and that whole bit of nonsense. And it's just because they're still babies. And so, as far as how do you stop that? It's like, as long as people get away with being able to lie to the public and the public not knowing any better, then other people are going to want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But once everybody knows that it's not what it looks like, then it becomes a shameful thing to do rather than a thing that gets you likes and comments.
I love it. This has been an incredible conversation. I appreciate you taking your time and